Captain Wyatt Bridger learned this truth at 4:47 in the morning on December 6, 1950, as he pressed his face against frozen ground that burned like hot metal against his skin. Blood from a cut above his right eye had crystallized into red ice on his cheek. He could taste copper and snow. 12 men, that's all that remained. 12 men from the 47 who had started this nightmare 13 days ago. 12 men lying in the snow behind a ridge of broken rock, watching 800 Chinese soldiers climb toward them through the pre-dawn darkness. 12 men with 40 rounds of ammunition between them. The arithmetic was simple. The arithmetic was death. Corporal Finch Malone crawled up beside Bridger, moving with the careful economy of a man who had survived one frozen hell already. The scar on Malone's forehead, a perfect rectangle of shrapnel from Bastonia in 1944, caught what little moonlight penetrated the clouds. Malone's voice came out as barely more than frost in the air. "Sir, we have to leave the wounded." Bridger didn't answer, couldn't answer, because 300 feet down the slope, Private Danny Chen lay with a bullet through his thigh, consciousness fading in and out like a radio signal in bad weather. Chen was 19 years old. Chen had shown Bridger a photo of his girl back in San Francisco just yesterday. Chen was going to die if they carried him. Chen was going to die if they left him. Either way, Chen was going to die. And the decision was Bridger's. "Captain," Malone's hand on his shoulder gripped firm even through 3 layers of frozen cloth. "We move now or we don't move at all." 200 yards below them, the Chinese soldiers had stopped climbing. They were setting up a machine gun position. In 4 minutes, maybe 5, that gun would open up and turn this ridge into a killing field. No cover, no escape, just 12 men dying in the snow while 800 watched. Bridger closed his eyes, opened them, made the choice that would haunt him for the next 66 years. Leave him, leave them all, we climb. But before we understand how Captain Wyatt Bridger came to make that decision, before we understand what it costs to choose who lives and who dies, we need to go back. Back to where this story really begins. Back to a morning in California when a young captain thought he understood what command meant. If you want to hear stories like this, stories about the decisions that break men and the strength it takes to keep moving forward, hit that subscribe button now. Because the choices Bridger made in the frozen mountains of North Korea echo in every leadership decision, every impossible situation, every moment when doing the right thing means someone has to die. This is the true story of the chosen extraction, and nothing about it is easy. 18 days before the ice, November 8th, 1950, Camp Pendleton, California. The sun was warm, the sky was blue, and Captain Wyatt Bridger had no idea he was about to walk into hell. He stood outside the company headquarters building, 29 years old, with his new captain's bars still bright and unfamiliar on his shoulders. The promotion had come through 3 days ago, his first real command. 47 men who would trust him to bring them home. Bridger had grown up in Kansas in a town so small, it didn't have a name, just a crossroads and a grain elevator. His father had farmed wheat for 40 years and died in debt. His mother had taken in laundry until her hands couldn't grip anymore. The military had been Bridger's way out. Education, purpose, a chance to be something more than dirt poor and desperate. He'd worked for this. 4 years at West Point, every minute of training, every test, every evaluation. He'd scored in the top 10% on tactical assessments. He'd led training exercises flawlessly. On paper, Wyatt Bridger was ready to command. On paper. The door opened behind him. Master Sergeant Holland stepped out, a clipboard in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Holland was 52, had fought in the Pacific in World War II, and had the kind of face that had seen too much to be impressed by a 29-year-old captain with new bars. "Your platoon's assembled, sir. Briefing room in 5. Bridger nodded, tried to project confidence he didn't quite feel. "Thank you, Sergeant." Holland paused, took a long drag on his cigarette, exhaled smoke into the California sunshine. "Bit of advice, Captain, if I may. Please. And these men don't know you yet. They don't trust you. You're going to have to earn that." Holland's eyes, gray and hard, locked onto Bridger's. "And the way you earn it is simple. You make decisions. Good decisions, bad decisions, doesn't matter. You make them and you stand by them. Moment you hesitate, moment you show weakness, you lose them. And in combat, losing your men's trust is the same as killing them." "I understand, Sergeant." "No, sir, you don't." Holland dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "But you will." The briefing room smelled like coffee, sweat, and cigarette smoke. 47 men sat in rows of folding chairs, talking in low voices, sizing up their new commanding officer as Bridger walked to the front of the room. 47 lives, 47 families back home, 47 men who would follow his orders because the United States Army said they had to. Bridger cleared his throat. The room went quiet. Gentlemen, I'm Captain Wyatt Bridger. As of today, I'm your commanding officer. I know you don't know me. I know you're wondering if I'm going to get you killed. He paused. Let that truth sit in the air for a moment. I'm wondering the same thing. A few surprised looks. Good. Honesty was better than false bravado. Here's what I can promise you. I will never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. I will never waste your lives. And I will do everything in my power to bring every one of you home. Bridger scanned the faces looking back at him. Young faces mostly. Kids who should have been in college, working in factories, starting families. That's all I can promise. The rest we figure out together. Silence. Then from the back of the room, a single voice. That'll do, Captain. The voice belonged to a man who looked older than everyone else in the room. Late 30s, maybe 40. Lean and weathered, with a scar on his forehead that looked like it had its own story. The man stood up, came to attention. Corporal Finch Malone, sir. I'll be your senior NCO. Bridger studied Malone. Something about the way the man held himself, coiled, watchful like a wolf that had learned to walk among dogs. Corporal, I wasn't aware you were assigned to this unit. I wasn't, sir. I volunteered. Malone's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was iron underneath. Command's sending us to Korea. Mountain warfare in winter conditions. I spent 3 weeks in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge. 20 degrees below zero. I know cold. I know what it does to men. Figured you could use someone who's been there. The room had gone completely silent now. Every man was listening. I watched good men die in the snow in Belgium's Schepden. Watched them freeze. Watched them give up. Watched them make decisions that got them killed. Cold isn't like other enemies. You can't shoot it. You can't outrun it. It gets in your head and makes you stupid. Malone's eyes never left Bridger's. If we're going somewhere cold, you need someone who knows how to survive it. That's me. Bridger felt something shift in the room. A test maybe, or an offer, or both. Then I'm glad you're here, Corporal. Malone nodded once, sat back down. The briefing continued. Deployment orders, equipment checks, timeline. They would ship out in the 16 days. First to Japan, then to Korea. The war was going well, they were told. General MacArthur had the North Koreans on the run. American forces had pushed all the way to the Chinese border. The whole thing would be over by Christmas. Everyone in that room believed it. Everyone was wrong. November 24th, 1950. Chosin Reservoir, North Korea. The cold hit like a fist. Bridger stepped off the transport truck into air so frigid it made his lungs seize. 25 degrees below zero, the thermometer said, and dropping. Around him, the reservoir stretched out like a sheet of gray steel, frozen the solid vast alien. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks lost in low clouds. The landscape looked like something from another planet. Hostile, empty, dead. Except it wasn't empty. Bridger had been in North Korea for 6 days. In that time, his unit had advanced north toward the Yalu River and the Chinese border. The advance had been easy. Too easy. They'd encountered scattered resistance, nothing organized. The North Korean army was broken, scattered, finished. That's what intelligence said. Intelligence was wrong. On November 24th, Bridger's unit was positioned at a forward observation post 15 miles north of the reservoir. 47 men dug into frozen hillside watching the approach routes. Their orders were simple: hold position, report enemy movement, wait for the main force to advance. Routine, boring, safe. That night, as Bridger made his rounds through the defensive positions, Malone found him. Sir, something's not right. Bridger looked up from the map he'd been studying. What do you mean? The woods are too quiet. No birds, no animals, nothing. Malone gestured toward the tree line barely visible in the darkness. In Belgium, when the forest went silent, it meant Germans were close. Watching. Waiting. You think there are North Koreans out there? No, sir. Malone's voice was flat, certain. I think there are Chinese. Bridger felt cold. That had nothing to do with the temperature. The Chinese aren't in this war. Then someone should tell them that. For 3 days, nothing happened. The men kept watch. The cold got worse. The silence continued. Then on November 27th at 10 p.m., 8 divisions of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, 120,000 men, came down from the mountains and attacked. The Chinese had been there all along, hiding in the hills, moving at night, invisible to American reconnaissance. They'd let the UN forces advance deep into North Korea, let them spread out, let them get confident. And then they sprang the trap. Bridger was in the command bunker when the attack started. He heard it before he saw it, a sound like distant thunder growing closer. artillery, mortars, and then the sound he would never forget for the rest of his life, bugles. Thousands of Chinese soldiers announcing their attack with bugle calls that echoed through the frozen valleys. Psychological warfare, making themselves seem like an unstoppable horde in the darkness. It worked. Bridger grabbed his rifle and ran outside. The hillside had erupted in fire. Tracers cut through the night in red and green lines. Explosions lit up the landscape in stuttering flashes. And everywhere were Chinese soldiers, hundreds of them, thousands. Private Chen appeared at Bridger's side, his face white with terror. "Sir, what are our orders?" "Good question. What were the orders when you were 47 men facing thousands?" Malone was suddenly there, calm in the chaos. "Sir, we need to fall back now. This position is going to be overrun in minutes." Bridger's training kicked in. Assess, distinct, act. Fighting retreat, Sergeant Holland cover fire. Everyone else move south toward the reservoir. Go. Go now. Yes, the withdrawal was chaos. Bridger lost 3 men in the first 5 minutes, killed by mortar fire that came out of nowhere. 4 more wounded. They scrambled down the hillside in the darkness, carrying their wounded, returning fire when they could. By midnight, Bridger's unit had reached a defensive position 2 miles south. They'd made it, battered but alive. 43 men left now, 4 dead in the snow behind them. Bridger tried the radio. Static. He tried again. More static. The Chinese had either jammed communications or destroyed the relay stations. Either way, Bridger's unit was cut off. As the night wore on, reports started coming through on brief radio bursts. The attack wasn't just at their position, it was everywhere. Every American unit in North Korea was under assault. The entire front was collapsing, and they were surrounded. At 3 a.m., Bridger gathered his senior men, Sergeant Holland, Corporal Malone, and 3 squad leaders in a crater that offered some shelter from the wind. Situation assessment. We're cut off from the main force. No communications. The Chinese have us surrounded. We have ammunition for maybe 3 days of sustained combat. Food for 2 days, and the temperature is dropping. Bridger looked at each man in turn. Options. Sergeant Holland spoke first. Orders are to hold position and wait for relief, sir. Relief from where the entire division is under attack. Then we wait for orders. Bridger turned to Malone. Corporal Malone was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience. Sir, in Belgium, when we got surrounded at Bastogne, our orders were to hold. So we held. For 7 days. 167 men in my company. 31 walked out alive. Most didn't die from German bullets. They died from the cold, from frostbite, from giving up. So what's your recommendation? We move south, toward the withdrawal route, 78 miles through mountain terrain in sub-zero temperatures with the Chinese army hunting us. Malone met Bridger's eyes. It's a death march, Captain. But staying here is certain death. At least if we move, we have a chance. Sergeant Holland's face hardened. That's desertion, Corporal. That's survival, Sergeant. We have orders. We have orders that were issued when command thought we had 3,000 men in this sector. Malone's voice never rose, but intensity burned through every word. We have 43. If we stay here and wait for orders that aren't coming, we'll be 43 bodies in the snow. The 2 men stared at each other. Years of military discipline and chain of command versus hard-won survival instinct. The decision was Bridger's, a captain with 6 days of combat experience, 29 years old, leading men for the first time in actual war, about to make a choice that violated direct orders and might save lives or get everyone killed. This was command, real command, not a training exercise, not a theoretical problem. This was deciding who lives and who dies based on incomplete information and no good options. Bridger looked at the map. 78 miles to the main withdrawal route, through mountains. In temperatures that would hit 40 below zero, pursued by an army that outnumbered them more than 100 to 1. He looked at his men, 43 faces lit by the dim light of a shielded lantern. Kids, most of them. The oldest was Malone at 38. The youngest was Private First Class Keller, who was 19 and looked even younger. Bridger thought about his father farming Kansas wheat until it killed him. His father had taught him one thing. When the weather turns bad, you save what you can save. You don't waste time on what's already lost. We move at 300 hours. Corporal Malone, you know winter survival. You're my second in command for this operation. Plan the route. Sergeant Holland, organize the withdrawal. We carry all wounded. We travel light ammunition and medical supplies only. Everything else gets quiche. Holland's jaw tightened. Sir, if you're wrong about this, if I'm wrong, we die trying to get home instead of waiting here to freeze. Bridger stood up, decision made. If anyone wants to file charges when we get back, I'll face them. But right now, we move. No one argued. At 3 a.m. on November 29, 1950, Captain Wyatt Bridger led 43 men south into the frozen mountains of North Korea. He was violating direct orders. He was taking responsibility for every life in his command. He was 29 years old and he had no idea what he was doing, but he was doing it anyway, because that's what command means. You make the decision, you live with the consequences, and you never ever stop counting the cost. The cold was a living thing. That's what Bridger realized as they moved through the pre-dawn darkness. The cold wasn't just temperature, it was an entity, a presence. It pressed against them, squeezed the breath from their lungs, turned their extremities numb, made every movement an act of will. Malone had warned them before they started moving. You sweat, you die. Sweat freezes on your skin, drops your core temperature. So we move slow, steady. You feel yourself getting hot. You tell someone. We stop, we adjust layers, we control our body heat. Malone's eyes scanned the group. The cold is patient. It doesn't rush. It just waits for you to make a mistake. Don't make mistakes. They moved in single file, Malone leading Bridger in the middle, Sergeant Holland at the rear. The snow was 4 feet deep in places. Breaking trail was exhausting. They rotated the lead position every 30 minutes. Private First Class Keller had the lead when they encountered the Chinese patrol. 8 men, moving north along the same ridgeline Bridger's unit was using to head south. Both groups saw each other at the same moment, 40 yards apart, in the gray dawn light. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then Keller raised his rifle and fired. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. 17 minutes of brutal close-range combat in the snow. No cover, no tactics, just 43 men fighting 8 winner determined by who ran out of ammunition first. The Chinese patrol was wiped out. Every man dead. But the 3 of Bridger's men killed outright. 5 wounded. In ammunition, they'd burned through nearly half of what they carried. For 8 enemy soldiers. Bridger knelt in the snow beside the bodies of his dead, Private Morrison, Private Lee, Lance Corporal Peters. He'd known their names for 3 weeks. He'd eaten with them, trained with them, told them they were going home. Now they were corpses in the snow, and he had to leave them there because carrying dead weight would kill the living. Malone approached, his expression grim. Sir, we need to move. That firefight was loud. More patrols will be coming. We can't just leave them. Yes, sir, we can. We have to. Malone's voice was gentle but implacable. I've left friends in the snow before, Captain. It doesn't get easier, but it's not about what's easy. It's about what keeps the living alive. Bridger looked at the 3 bodies, looked at the 40 men still breathing. 40 men who were watching him, waiting to see what kind of commander he was. He stood up. Take their dog tags. Take their ammunition. We move in 5 minutes. They moved. By nightfall, they'd covered 8 miles, 70 miles to go, and they'd lost another man. Keller, 19 years old, the kid who'd taken point when they encountered the Chinese patrol, had been hit during the firefight. A bullet through his left shoulder. Not life-threatening, Malone had said. Painful but survivable if they could get him to a field hospital. But there was no field hospital. There was only snow and cold and 70 miles of hostile terrain. Keller lasted until 6 p.m. Then the blood loss and the cold combined into something his young body couldn't fight anymore. He died while they were moving, carried on a stretcher made from tent poles and canvas. Just stopped breathing between one step and the next. They were in a valley, exposed, no time to stop. Set him down, Bridger ordered. The men carrying Keller's stretcher looked at him with exhausted, questioning faces. Sir, one of them said, set him down. Take his ammunition, his rations, his cold weather gear. Leave everything else. Captain, Malone's voice quiet. Keller asked me to give you something. This morning, he held out a photograph. Said if he didn't make it, you should send this to his mother. Bridger took the photograph, a woman in her 40s standing in front of a house somewhere in America, smiling, waiting for a son who was already dead in a Korean valley. He put the photograph in his pocket. Move out. They left Keller there, another sacrifice to the cold. That night, they found a small cluster of abandoned buildings, a farmhouse, and 2 storage sheds, empty and cold, but offering some shelter from the wind. Bridger posted sentries and let the men rest in 4-hour shifts. He couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the farmhouse with Malone, reviewing the map by the dim light of a shielded lantern. 8 miles today, Bridger said. At this rate, we'll reach the withdrawal route in 9 days, assuming we don't encounter more patrols, assuming the weather doesn't get worse, assuming we don't lose more men. A lot of assumptions, sir. You were at Bastonia. How did you do it? How did you keep men alive in the cold? Malone was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the temperature was maybe 20 degrees. Cold enough to see their breath. Cold enough to kill if you let your guard down. Honestly, Captain, most of us didn't make it. The ones who did, we got lucky. Or we made hard choices. Malone looked at Bridger with eyes that had seen things no man should see. You're going to have to make harder choices before this is over. Choices about who you can save and who you can't. And those choices are going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Is that supposed to be encouraging? No, sir. It's supposed to be truth. Because if you don't understand what's coming, you'll break when it arrives. And if you break, we all die. Malone tapped the map. 9 days. We have ammunition for maybe 4 more firefights. We have food for 3. The temperature is dropping. We'll hit 40 below in the next 72 hours. And there are probably 6,000 Chinese soldiers between us and safety. So what do? We make choices. Hard ones. We decide what we can carry and what we can't, who we can save and who we have to leave. And we do it fast before the cold makes the choice for us. Bridger stared at the map. 70 miles, 40 men, 4 days of ammunition. Every calculation led to the same answer: impossible. Get some sleep, Corporal. We move at 0500. Malone stood, then paused at the door. Captain, Keller's mother. Don't send her that photograph until you get home. Keep it with you. Let it remind you why we're doing this. Why? Because that woman is waiting for 40 mothers like her to get their sons back. You're the only thing between her hope and her grief. Don't forget that. Then Malone was gone, and Bridger was alone with a map that offered no good answers and a photograph of a woman whose son was already dead. Outside, the temperature dropped another 5 degrees. That first night in the farmhouse, the cold claimed 6 more men. They went to sleep and never woke. Their bodies were found at dawn, frozen solid, crystallized like statues of ice. Bridger didn't know their names well. They joined the unit just before deployment. Replacements for men who'd gotten sick. 40 men became 34. The numbers told a story Bridger didn't want to read. Day 3, December 1st, 1950. 22 miles covered. 56 miles remaining. 9 men dead. 34 still breathing. Every mile they traveled cost lives. Every decision Bridger made killed someone. The only question was who. The sun rose at 6:47 a.m., bringing no warmth. The thermometer Malone carried registered 32 degrees below zero. The wind made it feel closer to 50 below. Exposed skin froze in less than a minute. Bridger had watched a man touch his rifle's metal receiver with his bare hand. That morning, the skin had stuck torn away when he pulled back. The man hadn't even screamed, too cold to feel it at first. They moved through a landscape that looked like the end of the world. White mountains rising into white sky. No color anywhere except the dark shapes of men trudging through snow. No sound but wind and the crunch of boots on ice and the occasional crack of a tree splitting from the cold. Malone appeared beside Bridger as they crested a ridge. The corporal's face was hidden behind layers of cloth, only his eyes visible. Those eyes scanned the terrain ahead with practiced wariness. Sir, we have a problem. Bridger had learned that when Malone said problem, what he meant was crisis. Show me. They moved forward to where the ridge dropped away into a valley. Below them, stretching for 2 miles, was a frozen riverbed. And on the far side of that riverbed, barely visible through the morning haze, were positions. Fighting positions. Hundreds of them. Chinese army. At least a regiment. Maybe more. They're dug in, Malone said quietly, blocking the direct route south. If we go through that valley, they'll cut us to pieces. Bridger pulled out his map, hands shaking from cold even inside his gloves. He studied the alternatives. East meant adding 15 miles to their journey. West meant climbing over a mountain range that would kill half his men from exposure before they reached the other side. Straight through meant walking into a kill zone. How much ammunition do we have left? Malone didn't need to check. He knew. 260 rounds, 4 grenades, no mortar ammunition. 260 rounds against a regiment. Arithmetic doesn't care about hope. Sir? Sergeant Holland had joined them, his face gray with exhaustion and cold. We can't fight through that. We don't have the firepower. I know. And we can't go around. We don't have the time or the supplies. I know that too, Sergeant. Holland's voice dropped. Then what do we do, Captain? Because I'm out of answers. So was Bridger. He was 29 years old, 3 days into a nightmare responsible for 34 lives, and he had no idea what to do next. He looked at those 34 men. They'd stopped moving, gathering in small groups, waiting for orders. waiting for their commanding officer to make a decision that would save them. Except there was no decision that saved them. There was only choosing how they died. Private Chen, the kid with the girl back in San Francisco, was sitting in the snow, his face blank with exhaustion. Lance Corporal Davies was trying to warm his hands under his armpits, a sign of frostbite setting in. Corporal Yamamoto had his eyes closed, maybe praying, maybe just trying to stay awake. 34 men who trusted Bridger to lead them home. "We wait for dark," Bridger said. "We cross the valley at night. No lights, no noise. We stay on the eastern edge, away from their main positions. It's a risk. It's suicide," Holland interrupted. "It's our only option. We can't go around. We can't fight through. So we sneak through and pray they don't see us." Bridger looked at both men. "Get everyone fed. Get them warm as you can. We move at 2100 hours." Holland opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He nodded once and walked away. Malone stayed. "Captain, if they spot us in that valley, we won't have anywhere to run. It's open ground. They'll have enfilade fire from both sides." "I know. And even if we make it across, we're down to ammunition for maybe one more firefight. Less than 1 day of food. We still have 40 miles to go." "I know, Corporal." "Sir, I'm not questioning your command. I'm just making sure you understand what we're walking into." Bridger turned to look at Malone. The older man's face was lined with scars and weathering, and the weight of having survived when others didn't. "How did you do it at Bastonia, when there were no good choices?" Malone was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I picked the choice that killed the fewest men, not the choice that saved the most. The choice that killed the fewest. There's a difference, Captain. One lets you sleep at night. The other keeps you awake forever. And which one are you?" "I haven't slept well since 1944, sir." Malone walked away, leaving Bridger alone on the ridge, looking down at the valley that might become a graveyard. They rested through the day, as much as you could rest at 32 below zero. The men huddled in whatever shelter they could find, behind rocks and shallow depressions anywhere that blocked the wind. They ate cold rations because fires would give away their position. They checked their weapons and their ammunition, and their frostbitten fingers and toes. Bridger moved among them, talking quietly, checking on their condition. Most were holding up. Some weren't. Private Davies had severe frostbite in both feet. He could barely walk. Every step was agony. But he kept moving because stopping meant dying. Corporal Yamamoto had pneumonia. Bridger could hear it in his breathing, wet-labored, getting worse by the hour. They had no antibiotics, no medicine. Just the cold and the march, and the hope that Yamamoto's body could fight long enough to reach safety. And then there was Private Chen. Bridger found him sitting alone, staring at nothing. The photograph of his girl was in his hands, the edges worn from handling. "How are you holding up?" Private Chen looked up. His eyes were red from cold, from exhaustion, from crying. "I'm okay, sir." He wasn't okay. None of them were okay. "What's her name?" "Eleanor. We met at a dance in Chinatown. She's studying to be a teacher." Chen's voice was soft, distant. "I was going to ask her to marry me when I got back. Had the ring and everything. Bought it before we shipped out. Where's the ring now?" "In my pack. Been carrying it this whole time." Chen looked down at the photograph. "You think we're going to make it, Captain?" Bridger could have lied. Could have told Chen that everything would be fine, that they'd all get home, that he'd marry Eleanor and have kids and live happily ever after. But Chen deserved better than lies. "I think that we're going to try. That's all I can promise. We're going to try, Ma." Chen nodded slowly. Put the photograph back in his pocket next to where the ring waited. "That's enough, sir. That's enough." 2100 hours. Full darkness. Temperature had dropped to 35 below zero. Bridger gathered his men at the edge of the ridge. 34 ghosts in the darkness, their breath freezing in clouds that glowed faintly in what little moonlight penetrated the clouds. "Listen carefully. We cross in single file 20 feet between each man. No talking, no lights. If someone falls, the man behind helps him up. If we get spotted, we don't fight, we run. Straight through to the far side." "Understood." 34 nods in the darkness. Corporal Malone leads. "I'll be in the middle." Sergeant Holland brings up the rear. We move slow, we move quiet, and we do not stop until we reach the other side. Bridger paused. "If we get separated, rally point is the high ground 3 miles south. If you don't make it to the rally point by 0600, you're on your own. Make for the withdrawal route however you can." No one spoke, because everyone knew what "on your own" meant. It meant death. "Move out." They descended into the valley. The first mile was easy, relatively. The Chinese positions were 2 miles away, far enough that the American unit was just shadows moving through shadows. The snow was deep, but the valley floor was flat. They made good time. Then at 22:30, everything went wrong. A flare burst overhead, sudden blinding, turning night into day. The flare hung in the sky like a miniature sun swinging on its parachute, bathing the valley in harsh white light. And 34 American soldiers were completely exposed in the middle of that light. For one frozen heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the shooting started. Machine gun fire from both sides of the valley, tracers cutting through the darkness in red and green lines. Mortars started falling, throwing up geysers of snow and frozen earth. "Run," Bridger screamed. "Straight ahead, run." The formation disintegrated. Men scattered, running, falling, screaming. The careful plan dissolved into chaos and terror and the simple animal instinct to survive. Bridger ran, his lungs burned from the cold air. His legs felt like lead. Behind him, he could hear men dying, screams cut short, bodies hitting the snow with heavy thuds. A mortar round landed 15 feet to his left. The concussion knocked him sideways. His ears rang. He couldn't hear anything but a high-pitched whine. Someone grabbed his arm, hauled him to his feet. Malone. The corporal's mouth was moving, but Bridger couldn't hear the words. Malone pointed south and started running. Bridger followed. The far side of the valley was a chaos of gunfire and explosions. Bridger's hearing started to come back in waves. Screaming, crying, orders being shouted. The crack of rifles. He made it to cover a small rise that offered some protection from the machine gun fire. Rolled behind it, gasping, trying to count his men. 12. He could see 12 men. Where were the other 22? Malone appeared, dragging Private Davies. The private's leg was bleeding, torn by shrapnel. Malone dumped him behind the rise and immediately turned back toward the valley. "Where are you going?" Bridger grabbed his arm. "There are men still out there. You go back, you die. Then I die." Malone ripped his arm free and ran back into the kill zone. Bridger watched him go. Watched this man who had survived one frozen hell run straight into another one to save people he barely knew. And Bridger realized he had to make a choice. He could order everyone to stay put, to wait here in cover while the men still trapped in the valley died. Safe choice. Smart choice. The choice that kept the men he could see alive. Or he could follow Malone. Go back into that hell. Risk everything to save whoever could be saved. It wasn't even a choice, really. Bridger stood up and ran back into the valley. The next 4 minutes lasted a lifetime. Bridger found Private Chen first. The kid was lying in the snow, blood spreading from a wound in his thigh. Still alive. Still conscious. "Can you walk?" "I don't think so, sir." "Then you're about to learn." Bridger hauled Chen up, got the private's arm over his shoulder, and started dragging him towards safety. 50 yards. Might as well have been 50 miles. Every step was fire in his lungs and lead in his legs. Machine gun bullets kicked up snow around them. Something tugged at Bridger's sleeve, a bullet passing so close he felt the heat through the fabric. They made it to cover. Barely. Bridger went back. Found Corporal Yamamoto coughing blood pneumonia, having turned into something worse. Got him moving. Went back again. Found 2 men he didn't even know their names huddled behind a small depression. Got them up. Got them running. On his 4th trip, he found Sergeant Holland. The sergeant was lying on his back, staring at the sky. A mortar round had caught him in the open. His right leg was gone below the knee. He was dying, and he knew it. "Captain," Holland's voice was weak, breathy. "Get out of here." "Not without you." "I'm done, sir. You know it. I know it." Holland coughed, blood on his lips. "But the men, you can still save some of them. Don't waste time on me. I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, Captain." Holland smiled, or tried to. "For once in my life, I'm giving you an order. Get those men out of here. That's what matters." Bridger looked at Holland, looked at the wound, looked at the blood turning the snow black. Holland was right. He was dying. Carrying him would slow everyone down, would get other men killed. The equation had no solution. "I'm sorry, Sergeant." "Don't be. Just get them home." Holland's hand found Bridger's, gripped it. "You're a good officer, Captain. Better than you know. Now go." Bridger stood, looked down at the man who'd given him advice, who'd questioned his decisions, who'd served with honor even when he disagreed. Then he turned and ran. Behind him, he heard Holland's voice one last time. "Tell my wife I loved her." The words followed Bridger out of the valley like ghosts. They regrouped 3 miles south at the rally point. Bridger counted heads in the pre-dawn darkness. 18 men. From 34. Half his unit gone in one night. Private Chen was there, his leg bandaged with strips torn from someone's shirt. He'd live. Maybe. Corporal Yamamoto was there coughing, dying slowly from pneumonia and exposure. He wouldn't live. Probably. Private Davies was there, his frostbitten feet wrapped in rags. Every step was torture. He kept walking anyway. And Corporal Malone was there, his face carved from stone, his eyes empty. He'd gone back into that valley 4 times. Had saved 6 men, had left 12 to die. Bridger tried to speak. Couldn't. What do you say to men who've just watched half their friends die? What words make that better? There were no words, so he said the only thing that mattered. We keep moving. By dawn, tensions that had been building for days finally exploded. Sergeant Holland was dead, the unofficial second-in-command gone, and into that vacuum stepped a voice Bridger had heard growing louder each day. Sergeant Edmund Howell, 32 years old, Detroit native, had questioned every decision Bridger made since they started marching. This is insanity, Captain. Howell's voice carried across the exhausted group. We're dying for nothing. You're killing us with this march. Bridger looked up from the map. 18 men were watching, waiting to see how their commander handled descent. We discussed this, Sergeant. We move south or we die where we stand. We're dying anyway. Look around. Howell gestured at the men. Half of us are gone. The other half are barely alive. This isn't leadership, Captain. This is murder. 12 men were nodding. Bridger could see it. The unit was fracturing. Malone stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. Sergeant, the captain made a decision. The captain made a mistake, and we're paying for it. Howell turned to the men. Anyone who wants to live, follow me. We're surrendering to the Chinese. Prisoners have better odds than corpses. The Chinese aren't taking prisoners, Bridger said flatly. They'll shoot you in a ditch. That's your opinion, sir. I disagree. Howell looked at the group. Anyone coming with me, move to my left. Anyone staying with the captain, stay where you are. Silence. Then movement. 12 men stood up and walked to Howell's side. 12 who'd decided Bridger's way was death. 18 became 6. Bridger could have ordered them to stay. Could have pulled rank, threatened court-martial. But what was the point? Men who don't want to follow can't be led. Take supplies. Half of what's left. You'll need them. Howell looked surprised. You're letting us go. I'm letting you make your choice, Sergeant. Same as I made mine. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out. The 12 men gathered their gear. Bridger watched them prepare to leave. 12 men he'd led for 7 days. 12 who'd decided he wasn't worth following anymore. Private Chen appeared at Bridger's Fiena. The kid's wounded leg was barely holding him up. Sir, should we? Let them go, Private. Howell and his group moved east toward where they believed Chinese positions were, toward what they hoped would be mercy. Bridger, Malone, and 6 others watched them disappear into the snow. You did the right thing, Captain, Malone said quietly. Did I? In 6 hours, we'll know. They continued south. 6 men now, plus Malone and Bridger. 8 total. 8 hours later, they heard gunfire from the east. Sustained bursts. Screaming that carried on the wind. Then silence. Howell and his 12 men had found the Chinese. The Chinese hadn't taken prisoners. Bridger never mentioned it. Never said, I told you so. Just added 12 more names to the list he carried in his head. 18 men had survived the valley. Now there were 8, and 33 ghosts followed them south. Day 5, December 3rd, 1950. 38 miles covered. 40 miles remaining. 8 men left. No ammunition except what they carried in their rifles. No food except what they could scavenge. No medical supplies except some bandages and hope. And the cold kept getting worse. Bridger woke that morning to find 2 men dead. They'd frozen during the night, just went to sleep and never woke up. Their bodies were stiff, crystallized like statues carved from ice. Corporal Yamamoto was one of them. The pneumonia had finally killed him. He'd died quietly without complaint, still carrying his rifle in his pack. Private Davies was the other. The frostbite had turned to gangrene. The infection had spread. In a hospital, he might have survived. Out here in 40 below temperatures, his body had simply given up. Bridger knelt beside their bodies, took their dog tags, added them to the collection in his pocket. 16 tags now, 16 families who would get letters telling them their sons and husbands weren't coming home. The men gathered around the bodies. No one spoke. What was there to say? Death had become routine. Expected. Just another part of the march. Should we bury them, sir? Someone asked. Bridger shook his head. Ground's frozen solid. We can't dig. We leave them. More bodies in the snow. More men who would freeze where they fell. They moved out at 700 hours. By noon, they'd covered 4 miles. The pace was slowing. The men were breaking down. Not all at once, just a gradual erosion of capability. Feet couldn't feel the ground anymore. Hands couldn't grip rifles. Minds couldn't focus. The cold was winning. At 1400, they stopped to rest. Malone came to Bridger with a face that said the news was bad. "Sir, we have 4 men with severe frostbite. They can't walk. We've been carrying them. Can we keep carrying them?" "For a while, but it's slowing us down. A lot. At this pace, we won't reach the withdrawal route for another 8 days. We don't have 8 days worth of strength left." The question Malone wasn't asking hung in the air between them. The question Bridger had been dreading. Do we leave them? Bridger walked to where the 4 men sat. He knew them all. Private Hernandez, 22 years old, from Texas. Lance Corporal Wilson, 25, from Maine. Corporal Jackson, 30, from Georgia. Private Martinez, 19, from California. Their feet were black, dead tissue. Even if they made it to a hospital, they'd lose those feet. But out here, those feet meant they couldn't walk, couldn't move, couldn't contribute. They were dead weight, and dead weight kills the living. Hernandez looked up at Bridger. The private knew why the captain was there. They all did. "You're leaving us, aren't you, sir?" Bridger opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't want to." "But you have to." Hernandez nodded slowly. "I get it. We're slowing everyone down. If you keep carrying us, we all die. If you leave us, 4 men might make it. I can give you weapons, some food. When you're ready." "We know what to do, Captain." Wilson's voice was steady, accepting. "My daddy taught me when I was 10. You don't let yourself freeze to death. Too painful. You do it quick." Bridger felt something break inside his chest. These men, these kids, sitting in the snow, talking calmly about how they were going to kill themselves because their captain had failed to protect them. "I'm sorry," Bridger said. The words felt pathetically inadequate. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be, sir." Jackson managed a smile. "You got us this far. That's more than anyone expected. Now you get the rest of them home. That's the job." Martinez, the youngest, just 19, pulled out a letter. His hands shook as he held it out to Bridger. "For my mother. Tell her I wasn't scared, even if it's a lie." Bridger took the letter, took 3 more letters from the other men, promises to deliver final words to families he'd never meet. He gave them his sidearm, 2 clips of ammunition, some rations. Not much, but enough. "Thank you, sir," Hernandez said, "for trying." Bridger couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He just nodded and walked away before they could see him break. Malone was waiting, ready to move. "Give me a minute." "Sir, we don't have minutes. We need to put distance between us and them before—" "I said give me a minute, Corporal." Malone stepped back, nodded, walked away. Bridger stood alone, his back to the 4 men, his hands shaking. Not from cold, from something else, something that felt like his humanity tearing itself apart. He'd just sentenced 4 men to death, given them a gun, and walked away. And he'd done it because it was the right choice, the logical choice. The choice that saved 4 lives by sacrificing 4. Malone was right. There was a difference between saving the most and killing the fewest. And Bridger had just learned which one he was. 2 hours later, as they climbed a ridge 3 miles away, Bridger heard 4 gunshots, evenly spaced, methodical. He didn't stop walking. Neither did anyone else. Because stopping meant thinking about what those shots meant. And thinking about it meant breaking. And breaking meant dying. So they walked. And they didn't look back. And they didn't talk about the 4 men who'd made the numbers work. Day 7, December 5th, 1950, 51 miles covered, 27 miles remaining. 4 men left plus Bridger and Malone, 6 total. The temperature had dropped to 40 degrees below zero. The wind made it feel like 60 below. Exposed flesh froze in 30 seconds. The men wrapped their faces in every piece of cloth they had moved, like mummies, spoke only when absolutely necessary. Because speaking meant opening your mouth, and opening your mouth meant breathing in air that burned like fire. They were ghosts now, shells of men moving through a landscape of death. Automated, mechanical. 1 foot in front of the other, because stopping meant dying. Malone walked beside Bridger at the head of the column. The corporal hadn't spoken in 6 hours. Neither had Bridger. There was nothing to say. But as they crested a ridge and looked down into the valley beyond, Malone finally broke the silence. "Sir, we have a situation." Bridger looked where Malone was pointing. Below them, stretching for 2 miles through a narrow valley, was a kill zone, a perfect ambush site, high ground on both sides, one way in, one way out. And right in the middle, barely visible in the afternoon haze, were fighting positions. Chinese army, again. Bridger pulled out his map with hands that barely worked, studied the terrain, looked for alternatives. There weren't any. East was a cliff face, unclimbable. West was a frozen river with ice too thin to support a man's weight. Straight ahead was the kill zone, and they had maybe 20 rounds of ammunition left. Total. Between 6 men. We can't fight through that, Malone said quietly. I know. We can't go around. I know. Sir, Malone turned to face Bridger. We're out of options. This is it. We can sit here and freeze, or we can try to run through that valley and hope they don't see us. Those are the only choices left. Bridger looked at the 4 men behind him, Private Chen still limping from the wound in his thigh, Corporal Wallace half-blind from snow blindness, Private Thompson, Lance Corporal Anderson, 4 men who had trusted him, who had followed him for 7 days through hell, who had watched 33 of their friends die. 4 men who deserved better than this. We wait for dark, Bridger said. We go through at night, same as before. Sir, before didn't work so well. You have a better idea. Malone was quiet for a long moment, then no, I don't. Then we wait for dark. Night fell at 1830, full darkness by 1900. The men gathered at the edge of the valley. They didn't need orders anymore. They knew the drill, single file, 20 feet between each man, silence, speed, and prayer. Bridger looked at each face in the darkness, tried to memorize them, because he knew in his gut, in his bones, that some of these men wouldn't make it to the other side. If we get separated, he said quietly, the rally point is the high ground 5 miles south. If you don't make it by dawn, you're on your own. Head south, find the withdrawal route, get home. No one spoke, because everyone knew that on your own was just another way of saying goodbye. Move out. They descended into the valley. The first mile was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes you want to scream just to break the silence. They were halfway through when Bridger realized the mistake. This wasn't like before. This wasn't a regiment bivouacked in defensive positions. This was a trap, a deliberately prepared ambush, and they'd walked right into it. He opened his mouth to give the order to scatter, and the world exploded into light. Not a flare this time. Spotlights, dozens of them, mounted on the ridges on both sides of the valley, turning night into day, catching 6 men in a cone of light with nowhere to hide. For one heartbeat, Bridger saw everything with perfect clarity. The Chinese positions on both ridges, the machine guns, the mortars, the hundreds, maybe thousands of soldiers looking down at 6 Americans caught in a kill box. Then the shooting started. The machine gun fire came from 3 sides. Bridger hit the ground as tracers cut through the air above him, so close he felt the heat. Snow erupted in geysers where bullets struck. The sound was overwhelming, the continuous roar of automatic weapons fire that made thinking impossible. He couldn't see his men, couldn't see anything except spotlights and muzzle flashes and snow kicked up by thousands of rounds tearing through the valley. Someone was screaming. Multiple someones, voices lost in the chaos. Bridger crawled forward, his rifle clutched against his chest, 10 feet, 20. He had no plan except movement. Staying still meant dying. Moving might mean dying too, but at least it was something. A body lay in front of him. Private Thompson, half his head was gone, dead before he hit the ground. Bridger crawled past him. Another body, Lance Corporal Anderson, chest torn open by machine gun fire, eyes staring at nothing. Keep moving. A mortar round landed 30 feet away. The concussion rolled over Bridger like a physical wave, lifting him, slamming him back down. His ears rang, blood ran from his nose. He couldn't hear anything now, just a high-pitched whine and the thud of his own heartbeat. Get up, move. Don't stop. He stumbled forward through the snow, half running, half crawling. The Chinese were firing blind now, just putting rounds into the valley floor, saturating it with lead. Eventually they'd hit everything. It was just a matter of time. Something grabbed Bridger's arm. He spun ready to fight and found himself face to face with Corporal Malone. The older man's mouth was moving, but Bridger couldn't hear the words. Malone pointed up toward the ridgeline behind them, the one they'd descended from. Bridger shook his head. That direction was back. Back was death. They had to go forward. Malone grabbed Bridger's face, forced eye contact, pointed up again. Then he pointed at the valley floor around them, at the bodies at the kill zone, at the certain death that waited if they stayed. The ridge. He was saying, climb the ridge. Bridger's hearing was starting to come back in waves. He caught fragments of Malone's voice. Only chance, can't go forward, have to climb. Climb. 400 feet of frozen rock and ice. 60-degree slope. At 40 below zero, while being shot at, it was insane. It was also their only option. Bridger nodded. Malone turned and started crawling toward where the valley met the base of the ridge. Bridger followed. Behind them, the machine guns continued their work, cutting down anything that moved, anything that breathed. They found two men huddled behind a small rise. Private Chen, Corporal Wallace, both alive, both terrified. "We climb!" Bridger shouted, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. "The ridge! It's our only way out!" Chen's eyes went wide. "Sir, we can't. We climb or we die." Those are the choices. He didn't wait for agreement, just started moving toward the base of the ridge. The others followed because following was instinct now. Bridger gave orders, they obeyed, even when the orders were crazy. Especially when the orders were crazy. They reached the base of the ridge. Bridger looked up, 400 feet of rock and ice stretching into darkness. The spotlights didn't reach up there, just shadow and wind and cold. Behind them, the Chinese were starting to advance into the valley, coming to finish the job, to make sure every American was dead. "Climb!" Bridger grabbed a handhold and started pulling himself up. The rock was ice-covered, slick. His hands, even inside gloves, could barely grip. His feet slipped on every surface. Within 30 seconds, every muscle in his body was screaming. He climbed anyway. Below him, Malone was helping Chen start the climb. The private's wounded leg made every movement agony, but he climbed. Wallace was next. 4 men on a cliff face climbing into darkness. Gunfire erupted below them. The Chinese had spotted them. Bullets sparked off rock. One hit 6 inches from Bridger's hand. "Don't stop," he shouted. "Don't look down. Just climb. 50 feet, 100 feet. Every foot gained felt like a mile." Bridger's arms were on fire. His lungs burned from breathing frozen air. His fingers had gone numb. He looked up. 300 feet to go. He looked down and immediately regretted it. The drop was terrifying. The Chinese soldiers below looked like ants with rifles, ants who were shooting at him. A scream from below. Bridger looked down in time to see Wallace lose his grip. The corporal fell tumbling, bouncing off rocks. He hit the bottom and didn't move. 4 men had started the climb. 3 remained. "Keep going," Malone's voice from below. "Don't stop." 200 feet. Bridger's hands were bleeding inside his gloves. He could feel it, warm and slick. His fingers kept slipping. "Don't think. Just climb." One hand, one foot. Again, again. A sound from below. Not gunfire. Something else. An explosion. Bridger risked a glance down. The Chinese had brought up a mortar. They were firing it at the cliff face. The first round hit 50 feet below Bridger's position. Rock and ice cascaded down. The whole cliff face shuddered. "Faster," Bridger shouted, though he didn't know if anyone could hear him. "We have to move faster." Another mortar round. This one hit closer. The concussion almost knocked Bridger off the cliff. He clung to the rock, his entire body shaking. 300 feet up, 100 feet to go. His arms were giving out. He could feel it. The muscles were done, finished. He was running on nothing but will now. And will wasn't enough to overcome physics. He was going to fall. Another mortar round, even closer this time. Rock fragments peppered Bridger's back. Something sharp cut through his jacket into his skin. "Keep climbing." Bridger's hand found the top of the ridge. He pulled himself over, collapsed on flat ground, gasping. Every part of his body was shaking. He couldn't feel his hands, couldn't feel his feet. But he was alive. Malone came over the top next, dragging Chen behind him. The private's wounded leg was bleeding again. The climb had torn the wound open. But Chen was breathing, still alive. They lay there for a moment, the 3 of them listening to the mortar rounds hitting the cliff face below, listening to the machine guns, listening to the Chinese soldiers shouting orders in the valley. 6 men had entered that valley. 3 climbed out. Bridger forced himself to his knees, to his feet. His legs almost gave out, but he locked them, stayed upright. "We have to move," he said. His voice sounded hollow, empty. "They'll be coming up after us." "Sir," Malone's voice was quiet. "We need to talk about Chen." Bridger looked at the private. Chen was sitting in the snow holding his leg. Blood was soaking through the bandages. His face was gray. His breathing was shallow. He was dying. Maybe had hours. Maybe less. "I can walk," Chen said, but his voice was weak, and they all knew he was lying. Malone looked at Bridger. The message in his eyes was clear. "We can't carry him, and we can't stay here. Which means we have to leave him." Bridger had made this decision before. 5 times now. Left men behind because carrying them would kill everyone. The numbers always worked. The logic was always right, but the logic had never felt like this. "No," Bridger said. "Sir, bro." "I said no, we're not leaving him." Captain, if we carry Chen, we'll move at half speed. The Chinese will catch us in hours. We'll all die. Then we'll all die, but I'm not leaving another man in the snow. Malone stood up, his face hard. Sir, that's not command. That's emotion. That's getting people killed for no reason. Maybe, but I'm done with the logic, Corporal. I'm done choosing who lives and who dies based on who can walk and who can't. Bridger's voice was rising now, cracking. 33 men, Malone. 33. I've left them in the snow. I've given them guns to shoot themselves. I've watched them die while I kept walking. And I'm done. We carry Chen or I stay here with him. Those are the choices. Silence. The wind howled. Below them, the Chinese were regrouping. Then Malone nodded slowly. All right, Captain. We carry him. But when we all die because of it, remember it was your choice. I will. I promise you I will remember every choice I've made for the rest of my life. They made a stretcher from Malone's jacket and 2 broken tree branches, put Chen on it, started walking south. Slow. So slow. With Chen between them, they could barely manage 2 miles per hour. The Chinese would be following, coming fast. But Bridger didn't care anymore. He was done with the logic. They walked through the night, 3 men moving through frozen darkness, 2 carrying a third who should have been left behind. Chen drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he talked, rambling fever-driven words about Eleanor, about the ring in his pack, about the wedding he'd planned. Sometimes he screamed from the pain. Sometimes he was silent, and those silences were worse than the screaming because Bridger thought each one might be the last. But Chen kept breathing, kept living, stubborn and determined even while dying. Dawn came at 6:47, gray light revealing a landscape of white and ice, and revealed something else, the withdrawal route. 5 miles ahead, Bridger could see it. A road carved through the mountains, trucks, troops, American forces evacuating south. Safety, home, survival. 5 miles. They'd covered 52 miles in 7 days. Lost 44 men, 5 miles more, and it was over. Almost there, Malone said. His voice was raw from cold and exhaustion. We're actually going to make it. Bridger allowed himself to hope. For the first time in 7 days, he let himself believe they might survive. Then he heard the engines. Behind them, coming fast, Chinese trucks carrying soldiers up the valley road, cutting off their escape route. Bridger stopped walking, studied the terrain. They were on open ground, no cover, nowhere to hide. The trucks would reach them in minutes. How much ammunition do we have left? Malone checked. 11 rounds, total. 11 rounds against what looked like 2 trucks, maybe 40 soldiers. Arithmetic doesn't care about bravery. Sir, Malone's voice was very quiet. If we leave Chen, we can run. Might make it to the withdrawal route before they catch us. Bridger looked down at Chen. The private's eyes were open watching him. Chen knew what Malone was suggesting, and Chen knew Bridger was considering it. Do it, sir, Chen whispered. Leave me. Get yourselves out. No. Captain, I said no. Bridger looked at Malone. You want to run. I'm staying with Chen. That's suicide. Probably, but I'm done leaving people behind. Malone stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something Bridger didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of a man who'd seen too much survive too long and finally stopped caring. You know what, Captain, screw it. I'm tired of running anyway. Malone chambered around in his rifle. We make our stand here. Die on our feet instead of frozen in the snow. There are worse ways to go. The trucks were close now, half a mile. Bridger could see the soldiers in the back, rifles ready. He helped Chen sit up against a rock. Gave him the sidearm with the last 2 rounds. If they get past us, Bridger said quietly, you know what to do. Chen took the gun. His hand was shaking, but his eyes were clear. Thank you, sir, for not leaving me. Thank you for making me remember what honor means. Bridger and Malone took positions 20 feet apart, 11 rounds between them, against 40 men. Arithmetic doesn't matter when you've already chosen to die. The truck stopped 200 yards away. Soldiers jumped out, formed up, started advancing. Bridger raised his rifle, took aim. His finger rested on the trigger. This was it, the end of the march, the end of 7 days of hell, the end of Captain Wyatt Bridger, who tried his best and failed anyway. He thought about the 33 men he'd left behind, hoped they'd understand, hoped someone would tell their families they'd died bravely. He thought about his mother and father back in Kansas. They'd get a telegram, your son died in Korea, he served with honor. Would they be proud? Or would they just be sad that their only child was gone? The Chinese soldiers were 100 yards away now, close enough to open fire. Bridger took a breath, started to squeeze the trigger, and then the sky opened up. The sound came first, a roar like the end of the world. Then the shapes dark against the gray dawn sky. 4 F-86 Sabre jets diving out of the clouds. They came in low and fast, their .50 caliber machine guns tearing into the Chinese soldiers. The attack lasted maybe 30 seconds. Just one strafing run. When it was over, the Chinese formation had been shattered. Bodies littered the snow. The survivors were running back toward their trucks. The jets circled once, waggled their wings, a pilot's salute, and disappeared back into the clouds. Bridger stood there, his rifle still raised, not quite believing what had just happened. They'd been saved. At the last possible second, when all hope was gone, they'd been saved. Sir, Malone was pointing south. American trucks were coming up the road from the withdrawal route, a rescue convoy. They'd seen the jet's attack, come to investigate. Within 10 minutes, Bridger, Malone, and Chen were in the back of a truck wrapped in blankets, drinking hot coffee that tasted like heaven. A medic was working on Chen's leg. "He'll live," the medic said. "Leg's infected, but we can handle it. He'll keep the leg too if we get him to a field hospital fast enough." Chen looked at Bridger. Tears were streaming down his face. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Bridger nodded. Then he closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. They'd made it. 3 men from 47. Sometimes arithmetic is wrong. Camp Pendleton, California. December 18th, 1950. Bridger stood at attention in front of Colonel Webster's desk, his dress uniform crisp, his face carefully neutral. Beside him stood Corporal Malone, equally rigid. Private Chen was in a hospital in San Francisco recovering from surgery on his leg. He'd keep the leg. He'd walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he'd walk. And more importantly, he'd go home to Eleanor. They'd already set a wedding date. Webster looked up from the report on his desk. His face was unreadable. "Captain Bridger, you violated direct orders. You abandoned your defensive position. You withdrew without authorization. You led 47 men on an unauthorized march through hostile territory." Webster paused. "And 33 of them died." "Yes, sir." "The Army takes a dim view of officers who disregard orders, Captain, especially orders that result in significant casualties." "I understand, sir." Webster set down the report, stood up, walked around the desk to stand directly in front of Bridger. "You should be court-martialed, dishonorably discharged. Your military career should end here." "Oh, yes, sir." "But," Webster's voice softened slightly, "you also saved 3 men who would have certainly died if they'd stayed at that position. 14 others made it part of the way. You made decisions under impossible circumstances. You showed leadership under fire. And according to Corporal Malone's report, you refused to leave wounded men behind, even when it would have increased your own chances of survival." Bridger said nothing. Webster returned to his desk, picked up another document. "The men you saved have written statements. All of them. Everyone says the same thing, that you're the reason they're alive, that you made the hard choices no one should have to make, that you never gave up on them." He held out the document. "This is a recommendation for the Distinguished Service Cross, signed by every surviving member of your unit, including Private Chen, who dictated his statement from his hospital bed." Bridger stared at the document. "Didn't take it." "I don't deserve that, sir?" "Maybe not, but they think you do, and their opinion matters more than yours." Webster set the document down. "You're being promoted to major. You're being reassigned to training command stateside, and you're going to receive the DSC, whether you want it or not." "Sir, I request permission to decline." "Request denied, Captain. You don't get to decide whether you're a hero. The men who followed you get to decide that. And they've decided." Silence filled the office. Finally, Bridger spoke. "Sir, the 44 men who didn't make it, their families will receive full military honors, full benefits, and letters from you personally explaining what happened. I'm told you've already written most of them." Bridger had 44 letters, each one different, each one trying to explain the unexplainable, why their son, their husband, their brother wasn't coming home. He'd written them late at night in his barracks with tears running down his face, because every name was a choice he'd made. Every death was on his conscience. "Yes, sir, I've written them." "Then your duty is complete, Captain, or should I say Major." Webster extended his hand. "Welcome home." Bridger shook it. The grip was firm, respectful, but all Bridger could think about was the men who'd never get to shake hands with anyone again. The ceremony was held a week later, December 26, 1950, 2 days after Christmas. Major Wyatt Bridger stood on a platform in front of the entire base. Behind him were the two men who'd survived Chen in a wheelchair, his legs still healing. Malone standing at attention, his face carved from stone. Colonel Webster pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to Bridger's chest. The metal was heavy, cold. It felt like an accusation. The crowd applauded. Bridger didn't hear it. He was somewhere else. In the snow. In the cold. Watching men die while he walked away. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Officers shook his hand, congratulated him, called him a hero. He smiled, said thank you, played the part. But inside, he was screaming. That night, alone in his quarters, Bridger took out the medal, looked at it for a long time. Then he opened his desk drawer and put it inside. Closed the drawer, never looked at it again. Because that medal represented the worst 7 days of his life. Every time he looked at it, he saw 44 faces. 44 men he'd failed to bring home. He didn't deserve to be decorated. He deserved to remember. And he would for the rest of his life. Montana, summer 1968. Wyatt Bridger sat on the porch of a small cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. He was 47 years old now, gray at the temples, lines on his face that hadn't been there 18 years ago. He'd left the Army in 1952. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't give orders that might get people killed. So he'd come here to Montana to be alone with the mountains and the silence. He worked as a forest ranger. Helped hikers who got lost, fought fires in the summer, lived alone, never married, never had children. People in town thought he was strange, a hermit. But they respected him, left him alone, which was what he wanted. The mail truck came up the dirt road at 4:00 p.m. like it did every Tuesday. The driver waved, Bridger waved back. Collected his mail from the box. Bills, a catalog, and a letter. The return address was San Francisco, California. The envelope was wrinkled, forwarded 3 times before finding him in Montana. Bridger almost didn't open it. Most mail from California was bills or junk, but the handwriting was careful. Young, someone who took time with words. He opened it on his porch, coffee growing cold beside him. Dear Major Bridger, you don't know me, but you saved my father's life. Private Danny Chen, Chosin Reservoir, 1950. My father doesn't talk about the war much, but he talks about you, about how you refused to leave him behind when everyone else said you should, about how you carried him 5 miles through enemy territory, about how you chose honor over survival. I'm writing because I want you to know something. My father is alive. He married my mother, Eleanor, the girl from the photograph, in 1951. They had 3 children. I'm the oldest. My brother just graduated from Berkeley. My sister is in medical school. We exist because of you. Our children, 7 grandchildren, so far exist because of you. My father says you probably don't think about the men you saved, that you probably only think about the ones you lost. But I want you to know what you did mattered. You saved my father, and in doing so, you saved all of us. Thank you, sincerely, Michael Chen. By the 3rd paragraph, Bridger's hands were shaking. 7 grandchildren. He'd saved 1 man. That man became 3 children. Those children were becoming 7 more. Mathematics of survival reversed. Not death multiplying, but life. Bridger walked inside, found the box he kept in the closet, the one he hadn't opened in 16 years. Inside, 44 letters from families. Letters he'd written and received back. Letters from mothers and fathers and wives thanking him for trying. Letters that broke his heart every time he read them. And beside them, the Distinguished Service Cross, still in its case. He picked up the medal, held it up to the light. For 16 years, he'd seen only the men it couldn't save. But Michael Chen's letter showed him something else. The medal also represented the ones who lived. He still didn't deserve it, but maybe, just maybe, they did. Bridger put the medal back, closed the box, but this time he didn't lock it away in darkness. He left it on his desk where morning light would find it. Then he sat on his porch and cried for the first time since 1950. Not because he was sad, because for the first time in 18 years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe the choices he'd made weren't all wrong. 44 men had died, but 3 had lived, and those 3 lives had become 10 people, families, futures. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be enough. Washington, D.C., Veterans Day, 1998. Wyatt Bridger stood in front of the Korean War Memorial, leaning on a cane. He was 77 years old now. His body was failing, arthritis, bad heart, lungs scarred from breathing frozen air. But he'd lived, outlived most of his generation, outlived the war that had tried to kill him. A voice behind him. Major Bridger, He turned. 5 men stood there, old men now like him, but he recognized them immediately. The survivors. Danny Chen, now 67, walked with a cane from his wounded leg. Finch Malone, 86, still standing straight despite his age. And 3 others who'd made it out of different parts of that nightmare week, men who'd been evacuated before the final march. They embraced. Old soldiers reunited decades after the war. "We were hoping you'd come," Chen said. "We try to meet here every year. Remember the ones who didn't make it." "I remember them every day," Bridger said quietly. "We know you do, sir." Malone's voice was gentle. "But we also wanted you to know something. We've kept in touch over the years. All of us. And we've done the math." "What math?" Chen pulled out a photograph. It showed a huge group of people, children, adults, babies. At least 70 people. "This is everyone who exists because we survived Major. Our children, our grandchildren. Some of us even have great-grandchildren now." Chen's eyes were wet. 78 people, sir. 78 lives that exist because you refuse to give up on us." Bridger stared at the photograph. 78 faces. Smiling. Living. Existing because 48 years ago, a 29-year-old captain had made choices in the snow. "You saved 3 of us in that final march," Malone said. "But really, you saved 78. And when these children have children of their own, that number will grow. Hundreds of lives. All because you chose honor over arithmetic." "But the 44 will never be forgotten," Chen interrupted gently. "We remember them too, every one. We've built a memorial back in San Francisco, all their names. We visit it every year." "But you need to stop punishing yourself, sir," Malone added. "You made the best choices you could with the information you had. You saved everyone you could save, and you refused to leave men behind even when it would have saved your own life. That's not failure. That's heroism." Wow. Bridger looked at these men, his men, still calling him sir after almost 50 years. "I've spent my whole life wondering if I did the right thing," he said quietly. "Every choice I made, someone died. How do you live with that?" "You live by honoring it," Chen said. "By remembering, by refusing to let their sacrifice be meaningless." He gestured to the photograph again. 78 people, Major. That's meaning, that's purpose. That's why those 44 men matter. For the first time in 48 years, Wyatt Bridger felt something shift inside his chest. Not forgiveness, not peace, but something close. Acceptance. He'd made choices. Those choices had consequences, men had died, but men had also lived. And maybe that was all any commander could hope for. To save the ones he could, to honor the ones he couldn't, and to remember them all. Montana, June 2016. Wyatt Bridger died in his sleep at the age of 95. Quietly, peacefully. In the cabin where he'd lived for 60 years, the funeral was held a week later, a small church in a small town. The organizers expected maybe 20 people. 78 showed up. The survivors and their families. 3 generations of people who existed because a young captain had refused to leave men behind. They buried him in a military cemetery. Full honors. 21 gun salute. Taps played on a bugle that echoed through the mountains. On his headstone, they inscribed the words chosen by the survivors. Major Wyatt Bridger, 1921 to 2016, U.S. Army Korean War. He chose honor over arithmetic. Beneath that, in smaller letters, 47 men began the march. 3 survived. 78 lives exist because of his choices. They remember. We remember. Always. The story of Wyatt Bridger and the Chosin extraction became legend in military circles. Not because of the tactical brilliance, there was none. Not because of the victory, there was no victory, but because of the choices. The impossible, terrible, necessary choices that every leader must make when there are no good options. When arithmetic says leave them behind and the heart says carry them anyway. Bridger chose the heart, and 44 men died, but 3 men lived, and those 3 became 78, who became hundreds, who became thousands. Every one of them carrying the story of a captain who refused to give up, who chose honor over survival, who made the hard decisions and lived with the consequences for 66 years. They say leadership is about making the right choices. But Wyatt Bridger learned something else. Leadership is about making choices when there is no right answer. When every option means someone dies. When arithmetic says one thing and your humanity says another. Leadership is about living with those choices, remembering the cause and honoring the sacrifice, and never ever forgetting the faces of the men you couldn't save. Because those faces matter. Those lives matter. And carrying that weight, that terrible necessary weight, is what separates a commander from a leader. Wyatt Bridger was a leader, and 78 people alive today are proof that leadership matters, even when it breaks you, especially when it breaks you. This is the truth of command. This is the price of honor. This is what it means to lead. And this is why we remember.